Hey Joe fans, I'm JoeFan82 and this is my first Q&A video. When I did my 1000 subscriber giveaway announcement video, I asked for people to submit questions for Q&A and this is it. So let's get right into it. Before I do anything, I want to sincerely apologize if I mispronounce your name or your YouTube or Google handle that you're using, so I apologize for that. So the first question comes from Zed Kaizoku, who I recognize. You've been following me in my videos for a while, so thank you for that. He actually has two questions. The first one is, what is your favorite G.I. Joe or Cobra toy, one vintage and one modern? So my favorite vintage toy is the figure that got the most playtime when I was a kid, and believe it or not, that was Scoop. Yes, Scoop. I used him mostly as a kind of a guy that was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was my John McClane character. We would have a big battle going on, my brother and I, and there would be this one guy. He was there, and most of the time he didn't have any of his accessories that he came with. All he had was just one handgun, and he went through, and a lot of the times he ended up, saving the day. So Scoop was my favorite vintage figure, and as far as modern goes, that it's hard for me to choose favorites on anything, really. But to say a favorite modern figure today, I would say 50th anniversary Gung Ho. That's a great figure, great sculpt, a nice callback to the vintage design, and just an all-around great figure. So I'm going to go with Gung Ho. Now tomorrow that answer might be different, but today it's Gung Ho. Now the second question from Zed Kaizoku, again I apologize if I mispronounced that, is, have you read the comics or only watch the series Sunbow or Deke? Sunbow and Deke. So I have read the comics and I have watched the shows. When I was a kid, I got into the comics very late, towards the back half, and my brother and I, we had maybe a dozen, maybe 15, 20 issues tops, and that was over the course of several years. So at the same time, I was into other comics, and we didn't have the ability to go to a comic book store or any place that sold comics on a regular basis, and I don't think I really knew about subscriptions at that point. So we got comics very sparingly, and a lot of the times we ended up getting superhero stuff. But once in a while we would get a G.I. Joe too. So I did read the original Marvel run, and I read Devil's Due, and I started reading the latest incarnation by Aubrey Stitterson, and then I stopped after the whole thing with him happened. And so now I'm thinking about going back and catching up with the Real American Hero series that Larry Hama restarted at IDW. But that's kind of a mammoth undertaking because he's written a lot. In the series Sunbow and Deke, my first exposure to G.I. Joe in animated form was G.I. Joe the movie. I was too young to catch the Sunbow series when it originally aired, but I think that I caught an episode or two in reruns or maybe on a VHS somewhere. I remember seeing it. But it was the 87 movie and then the Deke series, and I would wake up early on Sunday mornings to catch the USA Cartoon Express, and they had G.I. Joe, and I believe Sergeant Slaughter was still doing those live action intros for the episodes. But yeah, I caught all of the episodes that I did catch. I watched from the Deke series. So thanks for the question. Next one comes from Olga Rose, who writes, "What is your favorite G.I. Joe comic book issue/series?" So my favorite issue from the original Marvel run is issue number 121. So I'm a kid I was born in 82, so I didn't get into the comics till later, and I'm a part of the fandom that really, I loved the Ninja Force, and this issue had the Ninja Force on the cover. This was a great cover. You've got Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes and the Ninja Force all there on the mountain, and they're on that one cliff face, and you see the silent castle in the distance. And in the issue, they have to get into the silent castle from the rear, and at the front you've got the other Joes. I believe it's Duke and Big Ben. I can't remember off the top of my head everyone else that was involved. But Destro's in the castle, and I think that was the issue that introduced Slice and Dice, two really cool enemy ninjas. And Dice was purple. I like purple. So yeah, 121. Let me know what your favorite issue was from the original Marvel run in the comics. Let me know. Oh, also, as I said before, I read the Devil's Due. It started with Image and then it went to Devil's Due, and I really liked that. I didn't read the whole thing. I got out of comics altogether before it finished, but I really liked that run. Next question comes from Albert Moe, who writes, "In my collection, I concentrated on 82 to 87 Joe figures and vehicles. Is there a theme to your collection?" Yes, there is a theme. It is what I can afford. That's not really a theme, but it's basically what it's been so far. I'm focusing, up until now, I've gotten whatever's been available at retail. And this past year was the first time I did the FSS. But before that, it was just retail and what was available at stores currently at the time. So I haven't really gone back and focused on anything or bought anything in particular. But since there's no G.I. Joe for 2 years, I've thought about it. I've had time to reflect, and I think I'm going to focus mostly on the iconic looks for certain figures. It's probably, a lot of the 25th anniversary stuff that I missed out on initially. So I guess that's what the theme is, the iconic looks for figures. So I hope that's a good enough answer for you. Next question comes from Eritful, and they ask, "What was your first ever modern G.I. Joe action figure?" I got two. The first time it was at a Walmart, and I I don't think I knew anything about the 25th anniversary line before it came out, and I was walking through I think I just on a whim happened to walk through the toy aisle, and I picked up Snake Eyes and Hooded Cobra Commander. So those were my first two modern figures. Next question comes from Mike Smith, who writes, "Love the shirt, LOL." He's referring to the shirt I wore in the giveaway announcement video, and that was my HeMan Masters of the Universe t-shirt. So, and people have asked me where I got it. I got that from Kohl's. Now, I've been to Kohl's since I got that shirt, and they didn't have it, so I don't know if they carry it anymore. You might have to look around to see if you can find it, if you're into that sort of thing. And Mike Smith asks, "What made you start collecting Joes?" And I kind of answered that sort of in the previous question. I just happened to see them in the store. I picked up two. Now, when I brought those home, the Snake Eyes and the Cobra Commander, I opened them up, and then I got out my vintage ones, and I was like, hey, wait a minute, these aren't the same. These are taller. These look different. So I was kind of put off a little bit and when I bought them in the store, I was thinking that they were really compatible with the vintage line, which they're really not. But then later I saw some more in the store, and I picked up Zartan, the 25th anniversary Zartan, and that's really the one. I really like that figure. The design and sculpt were really good, and that kind of, flipped the switch and made me realize that these were pretty good, and they're releasing a lot of them. That's one thing I didn't want to buy. Like 10 figures and the line gets canceled, and then so the more figures that were released, the more interest I had. So that's, I guess, really why I started. Next question comes from Michael Adams, who writes, what would you say is your favorite piece of your collection, and how did you start collecting? So I already answered how I started collecting, so I'll answer the first part of your question. Favorite piece of my collection right now, my favorite piece would have to be the Pursuit of Cobra or 30th anniversary. I forget which one it is. Modern version of Quick Kick, which is right back there. I don't know if you can see it. I really like that figure, but that's also my son Aiden's favorite figure. That's the one that he chooses every time we come in and we get to play Joe's, and he always chooses Quick Kick, so that kind of has a special place for me right now. So I'm gonna say Quick Kick right now. And my tablet just turned off. Hold on a second here. Okay, and next it comes from Mike Horsley, who says, congrats on 1,000. Well, thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. Great shirt, by the way. Thank you. I've gotten a lot of compliments on that shirt, that He-Man shirt. My question for you is, who is your favorite Joe/Cobra? All right, this is going to sound cliche, and it's cliche for a reason, but my favorite Joe is Snake Eyes. I know it, everybody says Snake Eyes, but there's a reason that a lot of people say Snake Eyes. He's the coolest one. He's the coolest guy. I don't know, I love Snake Eyes. His backstory, he's a ninja, a commando. Just everything about him is great. Favorite Cobra. This was tough, but I'm gonna go with Dr. Mindbender. And if you saw my review for Arctic, Dr. Mindbender, you know I'm a fan already. But I would have to say he's probably, just because he's so weird and out there, and I love the mad scientist, Dr. Frankenstein type characters. So I'm gonna go with Dr. Mindbender. Oh, and he also asks, what is your favorite vehicle? So you didn't specify vintage or modern, so I'm going to go with modern, and I'm going to stick with what I have. So and I don't have a lot of vehicles, so I'm going to say the Eaglehawk helicopter, which is almost an exact duplicate of the Tomahawk helicopter, except for a few minor details. But the Eaglehawk is a great vehicle. The detail is great. It's a vehicle that it has weapons on it, bombs and whatnot, but it also is a troop carrier as well. I think it holds 6 as seating for, I think, 6 figures, and plus you can just cram a bunch in there. And there's not a lot of vehicles, at least air vehicles, that do that. I really like the Sky Striker. I had the Stealth Sky Striker, but it only holds 1 figure, which is kind of a drawback. So I'm going to go with the Eaglehawk helicopter, and it just looks really cool. And finally, our final question comes from Jack Sparrow, Captain Jack Sparrow. And I was contemplating answering this in my Jack Sparrow impersonation, but I will spare you. I'll spare you that. He asks, best 90s G.I. Joe figure. This is a tough one because I was into Joe in the 90s, in the early 90s before the line ended. Some of you, if you know Hooded Cobra Commander 788, shout out. He's sort of at the opposite spectrum of the fandom with a lot of people and who hate the 90s for the most part. I was there in the 90s and I loved them. So it was hard for me to pick an answer. So I have sort of, just when I looked on Yojo at what was available at the time to refresh my memory, there was just so many. And I just picked out a few that I remember getting a lot of play time when I was a kid, figures that I had. And they include, number one is Sonic Fighter Dial Tone from 1990. This was a great figure. I didn't know that this was I didn't know that that was a variant of the original Dial Tone. I didn't know there was another version of Dial Tone. That was the only one I knew that existed. And I love the paint scheme, the black, the dark blue, the silver. It all worked well for me. He had a beret, a mustache, and he just looked great. And the Sonic backpack with the sounds, loved him. Then in 1991, we got General Hawk in the flight suit. Man, that figure was, the sculpt was great, the head sculpt, and I love that he has a little bit of a smirk going on. Like he's fighting terrorism, but he's having a little bit of fun too, which is what I think G.I. Joe started missing within the last few years, was a little bit of sense of fun. And he has the jetpack with the wings on it, and those wings broke off pretty quickly. But that General Hawk was a great figure. And also in 1991 was the Crimson Guard Immortal. Now my brother and I didn't have a Cobra Commander. We got into Joe after the Battle Armor Cobra Commander was released, and they didn't have another one until years later. And so our substitute, our stand-in Cobra Commander, was the Crimson Guard Immortal. And if you look at the figure, he could be a Cobra Commander. I could see that look being on Cobra Commander, even though he's wearing red and not blue. But that was a great figure. And one last one was Destro version 3 from 1992. That was our Destro. I didn't know about the original Destro with the chrome head, but this Destro was really nice. He looked like what we were seeing in the comics, and the sculpt was great, and he got a lot of playtime. So there you go. Those were my picks for the 90s. I mean, I could have picked a lot more, but that was just a short list. So I want to thank everybody for submitting questions, and once again I want to thank all of my subscribers for sticking with me and following the channel. So let me know what you think about any of the stuff that I just answered. If you have a favorite 90s figure, let us know in the comments. We can discuss. Alright, that's going to do it for me for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.